In this video, I'm going to do a step-by-step approach to teach you how to paint watercolor trees. Start by drawing a circle. We're going to have our light coming from the upper left-hand side. We're going to split the circle into 3 sections for tonal value. Using the color of the paper for our highlights, then we will do a medium shade right through for the rest of the circle, and then go over the furthest from the light, so the bottom edge, with our final shade. By understanding the direction of the lights and shadows and tonal values, you will be able to give your trees shape and form and depth. For the purpose of our exercise, we're going to do our light coming from the upper left for all the trees and samples coming up. Now that we've done the first circle, we're going to do another one with 3 circles of different sizes and staggering, and then shade them in exactly as I did in the previous example. By doing this, it helps you to break the tree down and understand where all the lights and shadows should be. So, for this next example, we're going to do the same thing, but rather than circles, we're going to draw the tree shapes. So, do wavy little lines. It's more of an oblong or an oval shape. Make sure the 3 shapes are of various sizes and staggered. Now that you understand where the light and values are coming and the shape of the tree, let's paint. You can pre-draw the shapes if you like with a pencil. Just do it very lightly and erase them so that you can just see it yourself. And then fill it with water, and we're doing wet on wet, and then yellow is the first color I'm going to do. I'm using a medium cadmium yellow. You can use any yellow you'd like, something that you would see light enough for a highlight that we find in nature. Now, following the sphere shape, I'm going to add my second color, which is sap green, and I am just going to do it the same place I put the medium color in the example, in the pencil example. I am doing this wet on wet, so when I choose my second color, I make sure I blot it lightly on a piece of paper towel before going in. Otherwise, I'm going to bring too much water and they will be pooling. Once I've done that, I will then go for my third color, which basically I used a sap green mixed with indigo, or you can do sap green mixed with Payne's gray. Now we're going to do the second example in paint. So I'm doing 3 circles, and I'm doing them with the highlights, the mediums, and the shadows. Now, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. You want to have a little bit of white space between those circles. You want to make sure that whenever you're adding another color, you blot it just slightly so that there isn't too much water in your mixture. And if you have blotted too much, it might look like it's going on thick or if it's starting to dry. So what you do in that case is just go back and add a little bit more water to the mixture and bring it back in. You will notice as I'm painting these that I'm not just doing a brush stroke, I am actually sort of dabbing it in and letting it bleed, because these are organic shapes. Like right now we're still in the circles, but you will see with the next example, these are more organic shapes, so you want to have them look realistic. And by just dabbing in your paintbrush a little, it will give it more of an organic line as opposed to a straight line as in the examples. So now I'm working with the trees below. So I am doing, instead of circles, doing my little oblong shapes, but having a wavy edge. And it is important that you have a little bit of white between each of these shapes. You don't want to overdo it, because the whole idea is that we're going to see, and you will see this as we go on, you want to see a little bit of space so that we can put some branches there. Like right now I have too much, and you will see I'm adding more to my clusters of leaves so that they will get closer. Now the other thing, as you're adding colors, if you get too close and something hits another one, don't worry about it, and don't worry if the paint bleeds from one to another, because you can take your brush and you can just lift up any paint that's going into the wrong area so that you're not having your medium tone in your highlight. It's okay to have specks of it, but you don't want to have it completely cover it up. If your color is going on too dark or too thick, just put a little bit more water in your brush and go back and touch the edge towards the inside, and it will bleed up a little bit better for you. You will find as your paint dries, it does lighten up. So you may need to, once everything's completely dry, re-wet the area and then go back in with your colors just to give a little bit more punch to your tree. So now we're going to start by doing a tree. We're going to draw our tree in pencil, and I will show you how to add the trunk as well. This time we're going to actually have 5 sections for the leaves. As you can see, I am staggering them so that they're different sizes, they're different shapes. They give an overall tree shape, but we have these lovely little sections because sometimes the leaves are sticking out in certain areas and the lights hit it differently. And by doing it this way, we get it looking more like a tree rather than a lollipop. Now, to start the trunk, I do a Y. I just go from one branch to the other and then go straight down. Once I've done this, I will start at the branch again and go on the outside and draw a parallel line. I'll do it on the opposite side as well, and then erase the line in the center. Why do I do it this way? That way you get your trunk to be more realistic size. And that way you're not making it so the trunk is too thin or that the trunk is wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. Then I will go in between those little sections after I have done my shading, and I will add a couple of branches. But the branches have to make sense. So look at where your main tree is, add some branches off of that, and then follow those little branches as if they would naturally go up to the next section and make it so that they all look natural and they're not just little random sticks in there. As you can see by my shading, the light source is again coming from the upper left-hand side. So that means when I do get to the tree trunk, I will have the shadows on the right-hand side of the trunk and just under where the branches meet the leaves. Also note that I just put a line for the ground and then put a very light shadow to the right hand side of the tree going away diagonally. So I'm going the opposite direction of the light source. Now that we know where everything goes, we're going to paint our first tree. I'm going to draw my tree first, and I'm going to do this in the 5 sections as well. As you can see, I'm drawing very lightly, and I'm making sure that I have the space between my sections and that my sections are different sizes and that the branches stagger. So you'll notice there'll never be a break right above each other. It just makes it look more natural. Now that last one, I don't like the natural overall shape, so I'm just adding a little bit more, and I'll erase that line. I'll add my trunk, doing the same way I just showed you, doing a Y. Now, because I'm used to doing it, I'm just drawing it without the center Y, but until you're used to it and getting your trunks the right proportions, I would draw the center one and erase it. So as you can see, I'm just using the other lines to make my branches, putting the branches throughout everything. My next step will be to lighten this image, because if I don't lighten it, all those lines are going to show through the watercolor. So I use a kneadable eraser, and this is great because you can sit there and you can stretch it out and clean it up. And then I roll it into a long shape, and I roll it up and down over my image, and you can see it looks like the tree is completely disappearing, but I can actually still see it. It's light enough now that the paint is not going to bleed through it. I will now start painting it the same way we did the sections in our examples. So I'm putting water on the 5 sections, and I will get each one of them filled so they're nice and wet. By the time you get to the last one, have a look at the first one, make sure the water is still dry and hasn't been absorbed in the paper. And if it has, just get a little bit more water on your brush and go back and finish that off. Now start by going in with your highlight color. It can be any yellow you choose. As I say, I used a cadmium yellow, but it depends on what season it is. Because if you want to do this in the fall, you can be going with red, orange, and yellows instead of the mixtures I'm using right now. So I'm going to now start putting in my green. Now remember, don't overwork it. As long as your paint is still wet and the sections are still wet, you can be adding and lifting a little bit and dabbing. But if it has dried, don't try to fix something or change something. Let it dry completely, then go back in it. Now you'll notice my upper section hit the lower sections. So all I'm doing is cleaning off my brush, dabbing it off on the paper towel, and then I just went between the sections and just lifted a little. And it's okay if there's a little bit of an overlap because they're leaves. They're going to look like it's a natural tree. I just want to make sure that I don't lose my highlight from that section that I need to have. Now notice I'm putting in the darker color and you can still see a little bit of the yellow below it. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to make sure I get that because that actually has to be my darkest area. So I'm going to probably just add a little bit more pigment to my sap green, and I'm going to just go in on the bottom edge and just darken a little bit because I need the depth. And just by having the contrast of the shadows to the darkness, that's what's going to give my tree its shape and make it look more natural and more organic. The other thing I do is once I've done all my sections, I will take a bit of my sap green or my dark green and I'll do a couple of little dabs just in the upper sections because it's not, the trees aren't all solid yellow or solid highlight there. So I'll put a couple, and as you see, mine are looking like a little bit like dots. They are spreading, but they don't look natural. So I'm just going to put a little water on my brush and just tap around them, and you'll see they'll spread. And that way I get actually a fourth color, and it looks very nice and it makes it look much more natural. So now I'm going to start the trunk, and I'm just using burnt sienna for my base color. I'm just following my trunk lines. I will fill that in, and I'm just going straight in wet on dry. You could do it with wet, but the I've got enough liquid in my color that when I come on with the second color, it will essentially be wet on wet. So I'm going to come in with a sepia color, or you could use burnt umber or a darker brown, and I'm going to put it where all my shadows should be. When I add the darker brown, I'm actually going to just dab it in lightly. I'm not going to actually sit there and try and draw lines, and that way it's going to look a little bit more natural and more like a tree bark. I was just playing around with the ground. You can do anything you'd like. You could have put grass or whatever. I just used some of the burnt sienna and then some of the darker color, the sepia, just to give me a bit of my shadow. Now you'll notice when I went over on the left-hand side, it had dried a bit, so it lifted, which doesn't bother me because that's actually the side the sun's on, so there could be some highlights there. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button if you would like to see more of my videos. Be sure to ring the bell if you'd like to get notifications when I post new videos. Thank you for watching.